we will be creating an API and hosting it on AWS. AWS Lambda, which is a prime service used in the serverless concept. So this is how the basic AWS Lambda dashboard looks like. AWS has already automatically, written the basic code for us. So this is a Python code that it has already written. We can create an HTTP API, a WebSocket API, a REST API. Let's use Postman to hit this request or API. Hello friends and welcome back to Start Tonight. In this video, we will be covering another cool thing that we can do using AWS. Yes, if you know about APIs, you must be knowing that APIs can be used to interact with any backend. For example, if you have a website and you want to create some APIs so that the front end can interact with the backend. So the prime purpose of API is API stands for Application Programming Interface, and it's sort of a contract that a backend defines using which a front end or any other third-party service can communicate with the backend. So for example, let's say, you create a backend API for carrying out addition of two numbers. Now it's a very simple use case, but what if you do want to create an API for carrying out addition of two numbers? So somewhere on some server, you'll be having your API backend that is nothing but just a code running on a server doing some calculations. In our case, addition of two numbers, right? And there has to be some way to interact with this over internet, and that is using the HTTP requests. So we'll cover all these things. Now I will not get into the basics of how HTTP request works, but yes, you should be knowing what are the different HTTP methods. Like get is a method which can be used to get some data from an API. Then there is post, using which you can create some, entity using the API, or, you can send in some data that the API can use and process, and then maybe return some response back. So in this particular tutorial, we'll be covering post request. Now, why am I talking about API? Like I mentioned in the beginning of the video, we will be creating an API and hosting it on AWS. But how we will do that? In a previous video, I've already covered, how you can use S3 to host a simple web page. So you should definitely check that out. I've also created a simple video where I've shared with you guys how you can use Lightsail to host maybe a WordPress blog, or create a server which is ready to host a Lambstack website or a Node.js application. And it's easy to implement it, and it's super cheap to run a server on AWS using Lightsail. So I've already covered these two services. You should definitely check out these videos if you're a beginner, so that you understand how in different ways you can use AWS. So in this particular video, the services that we will be covering are AWS Lambda, which is a prime service used in the serverless concept. So I'll cover what is serverless. I'll give you a brief introduction to that, and we'll be using API gateway to sort of create an API endpoint so that the serverless or the AWS Lambda function can be triggered using that, and we'll be interacting with this, and we'll use Postman to test whatever setup we do. So serverless is nothing but a way in which you can host your functions directly without creating any server. So if you want to host a website, for example, you have to have a server, right, on which you deploy all the services, and on that, the code for your website runs, and that way, anyone on the internet can access it. Now with the serverless concept, you can have functions which are used to, maybe perform some logical operation, or maybe, communicate with some database that is hosted somewhere else remotely. And all these things can be just prepared as functions and hosted on some shared service. You don't have to create your own virtual machine. It is, automatically hosted by AWS. And then either you can add a live URL to these functions so that, you can directly access those functions, or you can integrate an API gateway. You can create an API gateway which can then be used to communicate with your AWS Lambda functions. So this whole setup can appear a little daunting at first, but understand it this way. Like I said, without a server, you just create a Python function or a Node.js function. So this is just a function which will accept some request, let's say in JSON format. It will do some processing and return a result back. Now what we do is we create an API gateway which gives us a URL that can be accessed via Postman or via a browser. And this URL will be hitting this particular function which is hosted directly on AWS. You have not created any server or anything else. It is just that you have created a function using AWS Lambda service, and this function will perform whatever operation it does. It will give back the response, and you get the response when you hit a URL. How cool is that? Now you can create a front end to access this API, maybe, use JavaScript and HTML basic to create the basic front end, and using JavaScript, you can hit this API gateway, send the request, get the response back, and you can create a small application using that. How cool is that? So let's get started. So let me go to the dashboard let me just quickly open. So here in the browser, I'll open up AWS console. In the previous video where I covered, how you can host a web page using S3, I also, created the account. I followed everything step by step. You can watch that video if you are new to AWS, and using that, the introduction part of that, you can create your AWS account. So let me just quickly log into the account that I created yesterday. So this is super cool. You don't have to trigger or create any server. You just have to write a Python function and, a couple of configurations, and that becomes available as an API. It's super cool. You'll see. So let me just search for the AWS Lambda service, and this is how it will look. Okay, so this is how the basic AWS Lambda dashboard looks like. Let's go to create a function. Like I said, it's just a function that is hosted online, and using an API, you can make it available on the internet, just like a REST API. So let's write it as my first Lambda func. You can give it any name that you want. So you can also go with Node.js function. I will pick Python because Python is a little bit more popular, and more of you guys would be knowing Python. So let's go with Python. I will not change any other configuration. Let's, be it execution role, create a new role with basic Lambda permissions. It's fine. We'll not get into the advanced settings because we don't want to. This is a beginner introduction video, so let's keep it simple. Although I will not keep it simple, we'll create so while working out with this, I thought that we should create an API to find out a discounted price. For example, if we send in a price and a discount to the API, it should calculate all the basic discount and just return back what is the discounted price. So it's better than addition, right? So as you can see, we have my first Lambda func over here already created. It doesn't have a trigger, it doesn't have a destination. So we'll get back to what all this means. And if you can see, AWS has already automatically, written the basic code for us. So this is a Python code that it has already written. It has created a Lambda function, a handler function, inside which there are two arguments, event and context, two parameters, and some return statement where it's returning a status code of 200 and a body. Now this context is nothing but the context of the handler. It keeps a track of how much time it takes to execute, who triggered this Lambda handler function, where are the logs getting stored, etc., other information. So this is just the basic context, just like we have a context for a conversation. To understand what is the conversation about. This is just about, what is happening with the handler function. Whereas this event parameter is important. So this will hold the request that we'll send. Mostly it will be in JSON. So as you can see, it has already imported a JSON module for us in this particular Python file. This is a Python file.py, and this event will have the request JSON. So we will be working with this event JSON. We'll be sending in data in this event, handling it, and doing some calculations in the body and returning some custom response. So this, like I said, is a basic function. This is already deployed, and let's see how we can test it. So this is a test button. If I click on this, I get this. Okay, create a new event using which we can trigger the Lambda function that we have just created, my Lambda test. And there is some sample event JSON. Let's just keep it this only. Yeah, let's just not do anything. Save. And if I test it, it says, okay, hello from Lambda, because that was the body of the response that this function is returning. Hello from Lambda. You can do anything over here. Hello from study tonight. Once you have made the changes, what you have to do is click on the deploy button. The new function will be deployed. If I click on test again, it will give me hello from study tonight. So now this Lambda function is live, right? Now this is hosted on as a AWS Lambda function. And what we do next is, now there are two things that we can do. We can directly jump into the API gateway, or we can do some, playing around here. So let's, play around with this function first. Like I said, what I want to implement is, I will send in some price and I'll send in some discount in percentage, obviously. Let's say I send in, 1000 as price and I send 50 as discount. So this will be 50%. And the API should return me, okay, the discounted price is rupees 500 or, USD, whatever, I'll just send in 500. So let's do this. Let's implement this calculation quickly. This will just be a basic mathematical calculation, so you don't have to worry about, how we do it, right? Like I said, just basic mathematical calculations. So to read this particular event data, because it's a JSON file like we see over here as well. So let's just, change how the JSON will look. So this is how I want it to look. Discount, and there won't be any third value, just two values. And let me send 1000 with this and 50 with this. Like you can see, these are string values, and if you know Python, you should know that to calculate or to perform mathematical operations, it has to be integers. So we will convert this into integer in the function. So here, if I do this, for example, what will I do? Let me just, write the logic over here. What I do is calculate the result. I'll do event and I'll find out the price from it. So this will, like I said, it will be a string value. So let me convert it into int and multiply it by it. Or, let's just, create variables first, like, price variable, and I put in event and I access the JSON value inside of it, which is price. You don't have to worry about this. If you don't know Python, just follow along. This is very basic. This is how you access JSON values by providing the key and you get the value. Here I'll provide discount, again in discount, right? And the result would be the discounted price. So what it would be price into 1 minus discount upon 100. So this is the basic mathematical formula for calculating discounted price. Like, discount is 50%. I do 50 by 100, get 0.5. 0.5 into 100, 1000. So let me give you just a quick example. So the price is 1000, 50% is the discount. I divided by 100. That's how we deal with percentages. I get 0.5. I multiplied this with 0.5. I get, 500 rupees is the discount. And the final discounted price would be 1000 minus 500, which is 500. So the formula can also be this 1 minus 5 by 100, right? This makes sense. You can Google it. This is the formula. So let's quickly use this and see if this is working or not. And I will just return the result over here. This can give error as well. So let's see, deploy. And ideally in the first attempt, it should give error, right? So if I test it, oh, I am a genius. So I got 500 as the answer, and that was the expected answer. Wow. Now at times, because we are going to make this an API and not everyone would be knowing that, okay, this is how this API works, or let's just, let it be like this and quickly create a API gateway. So that's what we discussed, right? Now we have a Lambda function ready and it's working as well. We have tested it. Now let's create an API gateway to access this Lambda function. We are going great, we are super programmers now. So let's do it. I'll quickly find the API gateway service. So this is the API gateway service. Let's open it in a new tab. All right, this is okay. So this is how the dashboard looks like. We can create an HTTP API, a WebSocket API, a REST API, a REST API private. We want to create a REST API, not the private, the public one, because I want to flaunt it to everyone, right? And that's what you want, my friend. So let's build it and let's see what happens. Okay, create your first API. Welcome to this. Thank you. Okay. And we want to go with REST, right? We want to create a new API and the name would be find discount. Find discount. Or calculate discount. That makes more sense. Calculate discount. All right. The description, use the API to find discounted price. All right. So let's just, so this is just an endpoint type. Edge optimized means, it will be more readily available, it would be fast. And let's just create. The video is going to be a long video, and we're almost towards the end. So now we have an API that's already created, but we have to have, like I said, this will be triggered over HTTP. And to send an HTTP request, there are different types of requests like GET, POST, etc. Because we have to send some data as well, and we want some calculations to be happen. So we'll be, putting it up as a POST method request. So we'll set it from here. Then, we'll be testing the API. If it works fine, then if required, we can make some changes to our Lambda functions to make it even better. And then, we deploy our application API live and we test it. So just, give me just 2-3 more minutes, stay with me, and, you'll have a full-fledged working API with you. So let me create a method. I will choose post and click on correct. It is created. Integration type with Lambda function. Yes, I want to integrate it with the Lambda function. What is the Lambda function? My first Lambda func, and I save it. Now you are about to give API gateway permission. Yes, okay. So now this API gateway is getting the permission to invoke the, our Lambda function. If I test it, and if I provide, like I said, we have price, let's do it 1500 this time, and discount, let's say, what do you say, 75, or let's do it 50 to begin with. Oops, 50, yeah. So this is the body that we will be sending test, and let's see what is the output. It says 750. Wow, it works. Now what if, I don't send any request body? It will fail, obviously. It failed because we haven't handled that situation where, someone invokes the API without sending in a request object. Our API would fail. Now we can obviously, optimize it, but, let's just go ahead with deploying this API first. So there are a couple of things that you have to do to deploy the API. You can directly deploy the API as well, but because we will be using this API from anywhere we want, so cross-origin resource sharing, so we'll enable this so that, it's easier for any client to sort of hit this API and, perform whatever operation it performs. So you have to go in actions and enable course, right? So we have done that, and now we will deploy the API, new stage name, let's say development. There are different stages of programming or, developing a software. Let's say this is a development stage, dev, deploy. Now, this is the URL that we have got, right? Now, again, because this URL, we have to send a post request. So if you'll try to open this URL in the browser, it will give you error because obviously, this will not work. So how we access, this particular URL to access the API, we use Postman for it. But let's, just go back to the Lambda dashboard and see if anything has changed over here, how to refresh. So if I refresh this, I should be seeing an API gateway connected to this particular Lambda function. All right, so we have an API gateway connected over here. If I see, okay, so this is the API endpoint that I've already created. We just created, and now let's, use Postman. All right, this is not Postman. Where is Postman? This is Postman. Let's use Postman to hit this request or API. So I'll go to new. You can download Postman from the browser. It's free. I put in my URL, which is my API URL. I go to post, and we need to send in some data, right? So I'll send price 1000. I'll send discount because our API works with all these values. If you send some other value, it won't work. 50, I send, and I get an error. Wow. Why did I get an error? Price is price, discount is discount, error message price. So something foolish happened with the API, but what was it? So what happened here? Oh, I think in excitement, what I did was I added the JSON, key value pair in the params. So here we don't add it because as you can see, these are query params and it got added in this URL itself. So we have to get this into the body. So I'll have to remove this and I'll have to create a JSON over here, like price, 1000 or let's say 2000 this time, and discount 25. All right. So if I send this, Yes, so we got the right answer this time, 1500. And that's how this works. So if I just remove this and if I don't send any body with this particular API call, what will happen then? The API will break and it will give an error that, okay, it doesn't have a price. So let's quickly fix this in the Lambda function. Although, this up until now, that how you can create a Lambda function and how you can host it using API gateway. And, you can just, rewind the video and, watch it a couple of times to sort of understand and follow it along to create a Lambda function and then use API gateways to host your API, your first API, and then test it using Postman. Postman can be easily downloaded from the internet and you don't even have to sign up. Although you can sign up and, save your request that you make. So now quickly, let's just add some logic because you won't be, creating some basic Lambda functions. You have to write some logic. Now the logic can be anything, right? Maybe you have a DynamoDB that is again hosted on AWS and you can, sort of use this particular function to connect with this, maybe store some user information and then, create some other Lambda function. So you can create more files over here, create again, more URLs, more APIs to link with those functions and, maybe get the data of all the user, post, add new user, update user. So there's so much that you can do. So first, try to understand what APIs are. I've tried to explain it to you. If you want, there's more videos. There is a video specially, explaining what APIs are in our YouTube channel. You can go check it out. I'll put in the description. It has a bit of volume issue because it was recorded a couple of years back. I'll create another video if you guys want. Although I've tried to explain what APIs are in this video as well. So let's, without wasting time, quickly, jump into fixing this. So I'll use an if condition. I'll put in if price in event. So that's how you check if the price field is there. So what will I do if this is there? Then I will do all this, variable assignments and find the result as well. And then I'll put in the result as a formatted string like this. The discounted price is result. All right. So I've created an output as well. I'll be returning this. Else, what I do is I put in the result a string with the message, or I can put in a multi-line string. The right way to invoke this API is send the following price with some integer value, discount in number like 50 for 50%. The end. So this looks cool, right? Let's see if this works as well. So we'll have to deploy this and let's test it out. So, all right, discounted price is 500. This is working. Now we'll have to configure our test event and let's just remove this. And there is no button to save. How do I do this? Cancel. Will it work now? No, it's not working. So let's, anyways, we have deployed our Lambda function. So let's use this to fire it up. All right, so we are getting this message. The right way to invoke this API is send the following, although it's not formatted very well. So if I visualize it properly, visualizing it, preview. Yeah, so it's not, we are not able to preview it very well, but you get the idea, right? How we can send in the rules, how someone can use our API. And if we want to, use the API, you have to send in the price, to 500, 25,000. Let's do this. And discount, let's say 90%. Wow. And I send it. I get the discounted prices. This. Now you can change it again. You can use some other processing like, you can use, remove this, all the digits after decimal. You can make it better. There's so much that you can do. You can even build a UI, like I said, using HTML and CSS for this API. So that's how you host an API. That's how you create an API. I know it was a long video, but I hope it was worth it. Now you know how to use AWS Lambda to create, serverless functions, and you know how to use API gateway to host the API, to host the Lambda function so that you can access it from anywhere. How cool is that? If you are a beginner, I would request you to go try it out and learn more about how APIs work. This is just another video in the AWS series. I'll be adding more videos. I'll be covering more services in AWS. So stay tuned. Subscribe to the channel. Press the bell icon so that you get the notification whenever I upload a new video. Go watch other videos as well. Share it with your friends if they're also trying to learn AWS. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. If you have any confusion anywhere while following this, post your comments and I'll be happy to help you guys. Thank you for watching this video. See you in the next video.